All right, we're recording. And
All
once
right.
again, the audience will have no idea what we were laughing about. Okay, so we're going to wrap up book 5, yeah?
That's
So
correct.
why don't you lead off with the summary, what brought us to this point? Because this is now, I think, among the critical components, parts to this overall dialogue, we're going to enter into something that's very interesting, important, and this is a pivotal section of the book when we start
Yeah.
talking about the Philosopher King.
Yeah. It's the Republic started with a question. I think one of the question, the most important question that we're trying to answer here is: would someone choose justice for its own sake, for no other reason? So much so that one chooses justice, and everybody else around them believes that this person is in fact unjust. Would that person still continue to choose justice? Justice for its own sake. That's what has led us down these 5 books, pretty much. The most recent discussions, though, were about this republic of the mind. And in order to come to the republic of the mind, the one that exists inside each one of us, Socrates decided to blow it up and look at it like a republic of the masses. How would you create the ideal republic out of a population? And you can use that and then realize what it would be to create the republic inside of one's mind. And so the conversation kind of was going in that direction. They had established that one needs to have the rational principle, which is the ruler, and then you have the guardians that are kind of the spirit that connect the ruling power and the decrees of the rulers to the auxiliaries and the workmen, who then do the day-to-day job of acquiring wealth, of building things, and so on and so forth. But inside of the mind, that would be the rational principle, the spirit, and then the what I call the lower order thinking, or the
Appetitive, right?
elements.
Appetitive, or the base drives, essentially.
Right. So the rational principle, the spirit, and then the appetite. So that's where we were, and then there was this whole conversation about thoughts, and masculine, feminine thoughts, and the new ideas, and how one would take those new ideas and continue to maintain the integrity of the republic. And we hit upon this concept of how does one maintain one's identity through a crisis, with the formation of ideas that were formed by the republic that existed before one came upon the crisis, and the best of the best ideas stayed. But as we went through the crisis, there was the guardians perished. The thought process one had before they went into the crisis perished, but some of these ideas were preserved, and they come out the other end and start anew and start afresh. And you never nearly lose what you had. You carry what you had through the crisis and come upon stronger, build more resilience. So next time you come upon the same problem, it's no longer a crisis anymore, because you have the tools that have survived. So that was the last discussion that we had till this particular point. So now that where we've arrived is that one of the companions of Socrates, I believe it's Glaucon, who says that, great, so now you've created this republic, but I can't find an example of such a republic. This republic only exists in our minds. It cannot be created in reality. And Socrates says, so just because something cannot be created in reality, does that diminish its value? The fact that we can create it inside of our minds means it can be created. But Glaucon says it's not sufficient. We need to talk about why that's the case, that a perfect republic cannot be created. And one of the reasons why a perfect republic cannot be created is because for a perfect republic to exist, one has to have the ruler of that perfect republic to be a philosopher. And the rest of book 5 and the early part of book 6 talks about what are the qualifiers of that philosopher. Now, this is from the standpoint again of the republic of a population, a republic of many, but if it doesn't require much really of deviation to come to the fact that we are talking about the republic of the mind and how one can have the rational principle be the ruler, but that rational principle should be guided by philosophy. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what's been happening to this point is the city state that they're talking about has been built and enumerated, and most of the discussion has been about the role of the producers at the bottom, what we would say represent the appetitive aspects. And then a lot of the discussion had to do about the training of the guardians and how they're selected and how they're allocated to the different levels of the society. But now what we're doing is a pivot, an overdue pivot, I think, to start talking about, okay, well, what makes the gold class citizenry? What are the markers of that? What do you need in order to actually make a system like this works? Because that's what's pointed out to Socrates specifically, which is that he is told, okay, well, this whole system is all well and good, but there's a lot of sacrifice built into this system. There's a lot of buy-in built into this system. How on earth are you going to get people to be unified with this degree of unity and harmony? And I think Socrates at this point says, all right, well, in order for this to work, you need to have a philosopher ruler. You need to have a philosopher king or queen at this point. And so then the conversation moves pretty quickly into, right, there's a discussion, like you said before that, where Socrates, before he starts talking about the components of a philosopher ruler, this important idea, because I think it's actually going to be an underpinning of a lot of the discussions about philosophy in general, which is this idea of not making the perfect the enemy of the good. Meaning Socrates is saying, just because you have an idealized aim, and maybe that aim is very grandiose, lofty, maybe impossible to achieve, you could still rationalize reaching for that aim. And in fact, that is one of the most rational things that you can do. And when he essentially enumerates what makes a philosopher, and what he's doing in a way is by de facto making a defense for philosophy in general in this description, that is going to be a central theme to all of this. This idea of having an ideal pinnacle state of some concept, and your desire to see that, to understand it, is what actually would separate somebody as a philosopher from the masses who have a tendency to sort of look at superficial iterations or just short-term, just near events, and making opinions about what those things are as far as what their relevance is in their life or in the lives of others, and then just sort of moving on. And so here now Socrates starts to enumerate the features of the philosophical ruler, i.e. the philosophical mindset.
Correct.
Yeah.
I like that, the philosophical mindset. So just the definition of philosophy, of philosophia, philo is love, sophia is wisdom, lover of wisdom. And so one of the key features here is, if one had to choose someone to lead, one would choose the person who has the most expertise. But when it comes to ruling a nation, what is this expertise that one needs to have? Quite often we find ourselves choosing somebody who's already excelled in one field to lead something that may not be necessarily connected. The reason we do that is we believe that it is by proxy. Because one person is an excellent physician, that would make that person an excellent politician. Just because one person was an excellent soldier would make them an excellent politician. And we see that, right? That people who stand for elections usually come from having done very well in a certain field. Now, wisdom, though. So there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. Now, one could be very knowledgeable about medicine, about math, about astrophysics. But wisdom is something else altogether. Now, even when we talk about knowledge is to know everything there is to know about that particular thing. All the whys. Right? And I've given this example before, and this is not an example that I came up with. This is an example that I had read. If you were to ask somebody, why is it going to be day or night? And they say, well, because the sun rises and the sun sets. And then, why does the sun rise and the sun sets? Because the earth spins around its axis and the earth revolves around the sun. And then why does the earth do that? As well, because of gravity. And why does gravity exist? And I'm sure there's an astrophysicist give you an example or give you an answer to why that exists. But if you would keep going down to why, eventually you come to a point where we do not know anymore. So one cannot, if you follow that line of thinking, one cannot say that one has knowledge of why there is day and night, because one does not know all the answers to all the whys there are. There are mysteries in space in the universe that we have no idea about just yet, right? But we like to believe that we are knowledgeable. And so if you look at even medicine in that case, and for all of us, right, there's only that many whys that you and me can answer, even though we're both experts in our fields, beyond which we fail. That means we're not entirely knowledgeable. But what that does for humans is the ability to be able to act despite the fact that we don't have knowledge, right? And the reason we have that is because of experience. Yes, we don't have the knowledge as to why there is day and night, but we know out of experience that it's going to be day tomorrow. And after that, it's going to come night. We just know that. It's just out of experience. You just have to live on the planet for a few days to come to understand that fact, right? But it takes experience. Someone who's never been on this planet, or if a situation in which you were just born, someone asks you, you probably wouldn't be able to answer that question. Or if your lifespan was less than that of a day, you will not be able to answer the question whether night follows day. But because we've had numerous such experiences, we can answer that question. And so that may be a silly example, but that is in fact wisdom. That's practical wisdom. Because you've lived on this planet long enough, you don't have to know all the whys. 100,000 years ago, even 10,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to be able to answer as many whys as we can answer today. But you would still be able to, out of experience, know that the sun will rise tomorrow, right? And it will set. And so that is wisdom. And wisdom is the ability to come up with a solution despite having all the answers, despite having perfect knowledge. Now, so one could say that one has wisdom in a domain. So we are wise, say, in medicine, right? As opposed to somebody who's never practiced a day of medicine. But because we have domain knowledge of wisdom. So I take that back. Because we have wisdom in the domain of medicine. That doesn't make us wise. It doesn't make us philosophers. Because someone who is wise about all things medicine is a physician or a surgeon in surgery. A philosopher is a lover of all wisdom. There is no differentiation between different types. And of all the wisdom that one should be trying to acquire, the one that matters the most is what is the difference between good and evil? Mm-hmm. How can I go on to make the right decisions, be afraid of the right things, and not be afraid of the wrong things in life, right? And to acquire that would be as close as one can come to truth or fact. Now, what is truth? Truth is what lies at the end of knowledge. When you have answered all the whys, you have understood the truth. Now, it's, as we've discussed before, it's difficult for humans, at least currently where we are, to be omniscient, to know all the whys there are, right? But You can come as close as you can to the truth. The truth is the sun will rise tomorrow. But that truth, actually, if you are an omniscient, omnipresent being, is not necessarily the case. There is a future in which the sun doesn't rise. Mm-hmm. But for a limited being like you and me, it is a fact that it is gonna rise. Now, similarly, so we don't have the truth. We're saying that the sun is rising tomorrow is actually a belief, because eventually it runs out. Mm-hmm. But you rather have the right belief or the correct opinion than have the wrong opinion, right? You don't want to be the person who says the sun is not going to rise tomorrow, which there's so many doomsday predictors who've going to come and gone, right? And they've been wrong about it. But my point is, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. You want to be on the right side of that equation. And the reason why you're on the right side of that is because you have the right set of wisdom that kind of backs it up. The same thing is true about life, the complex questions about life. Like, what is it? What is a good life? At the end of this life is going to be happiness. At the end of this life is going to be justice. This, what I'm going to do, is ethical. Right? That is also a belief, just like the sun is going to rise tomorrow. And you want to be on the right side of that equation. In order to be on the right side of that equation, it has to be backed by wisdom. And that wisdom is practical wisdom. It comes from being in the constant pursuit of what is in fact the truth. Because once if you know that you're in the right direction, you may never achieve it, but at least you know you're walking in the right direction. So you're walking towards a life that would probably be ethical, that would probably be just, and because of that, you probably will be happy, and that's why you probably are wise. You see what I mean?
Right.
And that pursuit will only come if you have a love for that pursuit. And that is what makes you a philosopher. And so I think the rest of these chapters is defining who is somebody who is a lover of wisdom, who is somebody who is ignorant, and who is it who occupies that central zone, that middle zone, where I find most of us are in that middle zone. What do you think about that? I've been going on and on.
I think you're right on track, and I think a lot of the the fulcrum here is this idea of a difference between beliefs, opinions on one side, and wisdom on the other, and it's essentially the philosopher who realizes that they must test their opinions and beliefs. They're the ones who realize that they must test what their senses are telling them: vision, hearing, taste, but even their own sense of reasoning. They must test all that against some other standard. So philosophers are constantly calibrating themselves to some essence or concept or form. And so the philosopher, through their own love of wisdom, is not satisfied to listen to somebody and say that something is beautiful. A philosopher will either explicitly or implicitly wonder, well, what is beauty? So when you do that, you actually now are creating this large conceptual standard. What you're doing is actually expanding, in a way, your intellectual vision to see things across different strata. And so somebody who's not a philosopher will hang on to their opinion that something is beautiful and leave it there. But a philosopher will say, from what I understand about my thinking about the concept of beauty, what the essence of beauty is, this matches up or this does not match up. So what the philosopher is doing is essentially they're constantly examining, refining their concepts of things like truth, beauty, fairness. And then when they are living their lived experience, just like you said, they're going through their nights and days, they're actually testing what their senses are telling them through their own life experience against that standard. And it's the philosopher who's able to do that allows them to sort of see things at a different level.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what makes them better leaders. Because what you want in a leader, frankly, is vision. You want somebody who can see the larger picture and understand how it matters at the smallest level. And you can't do that if you're going from situation to situation and unknowingly and quite arbitrarily making decisions about what is good and what is not without having a larger framework, a larger vision. And so the better you understand, which is why, in a way, this is part of what we're doing in this podcast, you and I personally. We had deep discussions about courage, justice, temperance, wisdom. Why? Because we want to recognize those things when we see them in life, and we want to be able to step up to the plate when there's an opportunity in front of us to act in that way. So that is the idea of the philosopher. So the philosopher is essentially putting principle over position. Okay, they're putting principle over opinion, and they're testing the beliefs. The other way I put it is, they choose deliberation over dogma. Okay, so somebody can have like some opinion about something that's very strong, but their interest will be in understanding, is that the truth? Like, the truth is what they're after. They're not necessarily interested in winning a debate per se, which is why Socrates triggered so much frustration in his interlocutors, because it's almost like they feel like Socrates is trying to tell them some opposite view, but he's not. He's like, no, look, there's this truth here. Let's you and I work together and get there. And that's what's frustrating them, because I think most people don't know how to handle Socrates. They're either an antagonist or they're on his side. But the people who don't know what he's up to, these interlocutors do, but people who don't get very antagonized by his questioning. And they don't realize what he's doing is he's trying to bring you along. He's trying to, let's follow together. I don't know what the truth is either, is what he would say. Let's figure this out together. And so they're more concerned about this pinnacle standard, this essence, or what they called some form. And when you realize this, there's something shocking that I read in this book. If you don't philosophize, if you don't populate your mind with pinnacle concepts of like, what is fairness? What is justice? What you're doing then is you're seeing versions of that in your life. You're seeing small appearances of these things, small appearances of beauty, small appearances of justice or injustice. And you think that is it. You think that's all. And so really, if you base your life on appearances, you are effectively living in a dream. You're almost comatose.
Yeah.
And strangely, if you live limited purely by your senses and purely by the day-to-day without stepping back and taking a very contemplative, going through this contemplative distillation process where you say, all right, what is fairness? Then you will just live your life essentially half asleep.
Yeah.
And he says that. He uses that analogy beautifully.
Yeah. The line here, I think this is the line, right? Yeah. Do you think he's living a dream or is he awake?
Right.
And this is a great point that you brought up about truth and beauty, right? These are what is truth? A lot of folks believe is opinion. What is beauty is opinion. And, well, truth and beauty are not opinions. But is a thing of beauty is an opinion.
Right.
Is this thing true is an opinion. And it is important to understand that one is searching for the truth and not looking for things that are true. And as one is in search of beauty and not in things that may appear beautiful or are beautiful. There's a difference there. And that's the point that you're trying to make about trying to figure out what the essence, what's the essence of justice, what's the essence of fairness, having that in the back of your mind as opposed to this appears fair. This is a fair thing to do as opposed to this is justice. There's a difference there. And the ones who understand that difference come to understand that beauty and truth underlie things that appear false and ugly are philosophers. The Marcus Aurelius has this line. He talks about nature. He says the universe, everything that exists, that has been created inside this universe is beautiful. One has to appreciate it. It's been created that specific way. He says the froth that hangs out of the jowls of a warthog is beautiful. It's just your opinion that it's not. It looks ugly to you, but it's in fact a beautiful thing. The way it glistens is beautiful. Just like how the stars in the sky are beautiful. But one could say that this is ugly and that is beautiful, but that's your opinion. Well, that's poor understanding of what beauty actually is.
So again, so what we're seeing is this split between belief and wisdom, knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
And there's a great term that I actually wasn't familiar with until I read this, but a lover of opinion is a philodoxer.
Yeah, that comes up.
So you don't want to be a philodoxer. But think about how many philodoxers you run into.
I'm a philodoxer, man.
Right. Like it's sort of the lovers of opinion, lovers of their own opinion. So you had an analogy that illustrates the difference between being a lover of opinion, lover of belief, and lover of knowledge. But so the analogy that I came up with, it's a very simple one, but I decided to use like football. So for example, let's say you have a hypothetical football. They say that they love football. And then you talk to this person and they tell you what their favorite team is. And then let's say that their favorite team recently trounced another team like 63-0. Like they just completely obliterated them. And you asked that football fan, what do you think of the game? They said, it was an awesome game. That was a great game. And then the philosopher would say, but I thought you liked football. So what is it about football that you like? And so here what's happening is that you realize that, no, this person is a fan of a team. They're a philodoxer.
Right.
They just want their team to win no matter what.
Right.
But a true lover of the sport, they would be talking about a game where it was tied.
Right.
It went into overtime.
Right.
And it all came down to a Hail Mary pass. And that is somebody who loves the sport and not the team.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a philosophical football fan and a philodoxical football fan.
Very nice. And a more, like a broader way of looking at the same thing would be if one were to look at someone's life. A life full of things as opposed to a life full of experiences.
Right.
And one would say, oh, beautiful house, beautiful car, lots of titles, beautiful life, as opposed to life of service, participation in the common good, friends, experiences, health, family. That is a beautiful life. And my point is the beauty of what a beautiful life is has got nothing to do with the things that signify it as beautiful. Another way of putting it is that one wants to truly live a beautiful life. That is the truth that they are pursuing, right? And during that pursuit, they do not amass the things that are conventionally considered to be beautiful, like a beautiful spouse, a beautiful house, a beautiful car. Someone will look at them and say, this person doesn't lead a beautiful life. But that person knows for themselves that they lead a beautiful life. Only a philosopher would be able to make out the difference, would be able to look at. Because one could say, one could have all of those things, a beautiful house, a beautiful spouse, a car, and all of that, and still live a beautiful life. Those two things are not contrary to one another. It's just that, it's not that if you have the things of beauty in life, your life cannot be beautiful anymore. But those are not the necessary things to make life beautiful. A philosopher would know what it actually means to live a beautiful life, right? So, same thing is true with justice. Going back to that original question that was put to Socrates. Why would someone choose justice even if the world believes they're unjust? Because the world is not made of philosophers. They're made of philodoxers.
Right.
A philosopher, if one is a philosopher, would know that their life is a just life and that happiness lies at the end of that life. And it's a beautiful life. And the ones that they're being judged by are a bunch of philodoxers. Now, a philosopher will also understand that their beliefs are not the truth, right? Now, I'm not a philosopher in that person. Like, I worry about what other people have to say about me, right? Because I have not glimpsed the truth in that sense, right? Or encompassed wisdom in that sense. But just because one says that it's not possible doesn't make this a useless pursuit. Just because this aspirational individual cannot exist, or one has not seen him exist or her exist, doesn't make this a less worthy pursuit. In your mind, just by rationalization, one can imagine individuals like this, who the world believes is unjust, because they are conventional, because they don't understand the difference of what is in fact truth and beauty.
Right.
And that individual is in fact a philosopher and does understand and lives in fact a beautiful life and has eudaimonia at the end of it.
A philosopher would assess things at the level of the outcome, and a philosopher would assess things at the level of the aim.
A philosopher would also judge based on appearance.
Right.
What does it appear like? Does this man appear just?
Right.
It's appearance.
At its face, right. What does this look like?
Appearance of justice is more. Appearance of expertise, appearance of wisdom is more important.
Yeah.
Than in fact, is this person wise? Is this person just? Right. So if you look at the political climate, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you've served, or if you're a physician, or if you're a billionaire, right? Suddenly now you qualify for being the head of the republic.
Right. Right.
Right, that's an appearance.
Right.
Isn't in fact the truth.
And one of the main points of republic is that political leadership is a skill. I mean, that is a skill in and of itself. And in the current environment we live in, there's still sort of this cachet, the outsider cachet, like, oh, well, this person's a business person, this person's was in the military, this is going to make them a good leader, and some of that does translate somewhat, but again, the rationale in and of itself is insufficient. It's sort of like, okay, one of the other things that you look at philosophically is leadership. What makes good leadership?
Right.
That's just, you put that on the list of truth, beauty, fairness, leadership, and so when you look at it through that standard, all of those things become secondary.
So to your point, so that's what, it's not that because one served in the armed forces or one is a billionaire, one cannot be a philosopher. That is not what's being said.
That's not what we're saying.
But just because one is a billionaire or one is served doesn't make them a philosopher either. Right? The Philosopher King, the gold medal that you were talking about, the demand or the ask is so high that it is aspirational. No one is, it's not something that you achieve. It's something that you constantly aspire toward. But that aspiration is what makes you a philosopher, not the achievement of it.
Right, exactly.
You cannot be omniscient. You cannot be omnipresent. You can work towards understanding truth and beauty. And also, while you're at it, understand that what one would consider to be beautiful or what would consider to be truth is just opinion. That one is converting from a philodoxer to a philosopher, and that is the constant, that is the examined life.
Right.
Right? Because there are a lot of us who are not even making that transition. One believes in certain things and they believe those things to be the truth. They are not in the business of figuring out whether in fact what they believe is the truth or not.
Right.
They are just content with it. This is my experience so far. This is it.
Right. Or they occupy themselves with reactionary endeavors. They don't like what they hear, so that's it. They're entrenched.
That's true. I don't want to be told I'm wrong.
And maybe it is wrong, but why not seek the truth? Why not? Is this really true? Ask yourself that question. As hard as something is to hear, is this true? Because if you align yourself to that, you're not going to be as concerned about what its impact is to you on an ego level or any of that as much. I mean, this is again aspirational.
Correct.
But that's the point. That's the goal.
And and to your point, like you said that, because what this may be true, what you believe may be true. But
yeah, you can have a true opinion.
One could have a true opinion, right. But there's a difference in knowing that to be true opinion and just happening to have the true opinion.
Right.
Right. It's like one performs an act knowing that there is repercussions to this and this is a courageous act, as opposed to someone just performing an act not even knowing what's at stake and being successful and everybody hailing that person to be a hero, and this person's like, man, I just stumbled into
what
this.
anyone else would have done.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I just stumbled into this. Like I was thinking, there's a difference there. Right. And that's the same difference about, of what you were just describing here, being by fluke, being right about it, as opposed to being right because that's the right thing to do, right. Or you have the right opinion because you understand what it means to have a right opinion.
Right.
But they say this, right? We have now discovered, it seems, that the masses, many conventional norms concerning beauty and the rest are somehow rolling between what is not and what purely is. What they're saying is the masses, the conventional norms of what truth and what beauty is in that middle zone.
Right.
Majority, that's their belief. right? So one cannot go by what the masses are trying to say about what is true, or what is beautiful. One has to come up with their own understanding of it. And one has to be a philosopher.
Yeah. We're getting pretty close to where we can end this, I think, because this is essentially the introduction to the Philosopher King that's going to be discussed more in book 6.
Yeah. Which is very, very interesting, like what's coming up next.
We still got...
And I think we should pause here. You're right, because...
Although before we pause, let me throw something out.
Yeah.
Because I detected something in this reading, and I want to know what you think about this. And this may be premature, or maybe we talk more about this question that I have in the next chapter. But, okay, so we go back to this idea. So a philosopher is a lover of wisdom. So the Greek term, like the philia, is having an affection to something for its own sake, right? Because the Greeks had different terms for love, right? We've talked about how they had a much more nuanced language than... so affection for something for its own sake. And that's how they regard wisdom. Now, to have affection to something for its own sake, do you feel like that would imply that you derive some pleasure from it? I think it does. Because once you have affection for its own sake, it's its own reward. So there's definitely a reward.
There has to be a reward component.
Okay, so right. So we agree there. And so now we got the tripartite soul, right? We got the rational, we got the spiritual, and then we've got the appetitive. And so do you see here what happened? Like the appetitive has snuck in to the ruler's house, because the rational principle has somehow closed the loop with the appetitive. You see that? And I think there's a clue here, because I think what Socrates is talking about is the reason this is aspirational is because if you do reach this Philosopher King status, you've reached a level of harmony where your appetites are satisfied by this search for wisdom.
You have reined in your appetite.
Or you have transformed it.
Oh, I see.
Because it's still there, right? And in fact, what you've done is transformed it into something that feeds the top level.
Because I see what you mean. So, because there has to be a positive feedback at the end of this, right?
Because think about it, don't you feel good? Like, I feel great when I read about philosophy, and I admit that. And I derive pleasure from looking at the world and looking at the world in new ways. So I think there's a clue there.
So if you say you're a lover of wisdom, love is also an emotion. It's not entirely rational. And he talks about this, right? It's in someone's nature to be so. The goal is not just that they are lovers of wisdom. They also have the nature for it. You see?
Right.
And so some people have nature for acquiring gold. It's not something that they can necessarily help. But one could rein that impulse in and, be a good auxiliary, right? Understand that one cannot be a leader. But then there are, and we'll go into that about what is it to be that philosopher? What are what it actually takes? And one would come to understand that it is a very high bar. It is not just for us to talk about philosophy and smoking pipes, right? That's not what it's about. But you bring up a very good point, and I think we've discussed this before. So if you look at, and that's why I feel like it's very important to read this before one goes on to read Stoic philosophy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So Marcus Aurelius talks about it when he says obstacle is the way, right? One's talking about Stoicism. A lot of Stoicism is about absorbing all the discomfort that life throws at you, all the uncertainties that life throws at you, how to make sense of it. But if one just was to absorb everything, one could become very morose. And Stoics there's a misconception that Stoics are like morose people. Like being Stoic is like you're not having any emotion. It's quite the contrary. Stoics enjoy life. There's happiness. There's a lot of positive emotion that comes with Stoicism. And so then how do you then combine positive emotion and obstacle? How can one be positive about an obstacle?
Right.
Because obstacle by definition is something that just causes discomfort and pain and anxiety and all of that. And one has to be a lunatic, honestly, to be happy as they are in pain and struggling, right? Like that's lunacy.
Oh, this is awesome. This is so good.
It's lunacy, you know.
I'm so happy.
And so when it comes to Stoicism, I think that goes back to the point that you were making here. When you say obstacle is the way, I believe it is every obstacle presents to you the opportunity to use your stoic powers on that obstacle and come out on the other side. And therein lies that opportunity, that ability to do it, the opportunity to test your powers that you have and see what's coming out on the other side. Therein lies excitement. Therein lies a positive emotion.
Right. So you reframe the obstacle. You reframe your opinion as, oh, this is a bad thing. Like, oh, no, this is a good thing. And the way to do that is to look at it as an opportunity.
Correct.
And then there's wisdom that undergirds that. Because how often in life do you go through something that's like absolutely miserable, and then you come out at the other end and you're like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Or I got through that. Or you're able to give somebody advice who's going through something similar. Like, man, I went through the same thing. You know, this is what you do.
But
Right?
I'll draw a little bit of contrast there. I'm sorry to cut you off, is you may go through it and come out the other end and say, okay, this was fine. I'm saying while you see it come on.
Oh, yeah.
Saying that, you know what? Hey, this is a good thing. I get to try out my stoic superpowers against this, you know?
But the other thing the Stoics have done is that they've sort of had an internal pivot, and they've learned and practiced how to have internally derived senses of well-being. So they find a way to sort of reinforce internally without need of an external validation or without need of right.
That is because
and that's because
they are
done
philosophers,
right?
You know, you're when someone.
And that's what I meant. It's undergirded by wisdom.
Yeah, that's right. This is your point. The point that you made makes perfect sense, and that's why one has to read this. We had this conversation. I said we should read this before we read the meditations. Right. And this is the reason why. Yeah. Because once you have this understanding, when you read meditations, it doesn't come across as, you know, someone who's really struggling and suffering through life and complaining about everything. Right. One sees why there is joy to be had in thinking that way. And actual joy, like positive emotion, you know, appetitive joy. That's the kind of stuff that we get from reading this stuff, right? And that's why it's not boring to us. But 10 years ago, there is no way I would have read this book. There's no way.
Well, then the other part of it is actually putting it into action. Like,
I
mean, I can't tell you how many times I've run into a situation and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do.
What would Socrates do? Right?
Yeah.
And there's and Marcus Aurelius talks about that too. He says if you come upon a situation where you want to act out in a certain way, right? You want to do something that would be not worthy of your character. You know, ask yourself, what would Socrates do? Mm-hmm. Or pretend like you have Socrates watching you while you're doing it, and would you still do it?
Yeah.
And if your answer is yes, then do it.
Yeah.
If your answer is no, don't do it.
Yeah. Just drink the poison. Just drink it.
Just drink the poison.
You'll regret not drinking it. All right. We should end it there. All right. Because we're going to go into book 6 next. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
All right.
It's great.
All right.